Tonight, imagine stepping through a heavy wooden gate as it slowly closes behind you. The world outside disappears, and you find yourself inside a medieval castle after sunset. Torches flicker along cold stone walls, distant footsteps echo through quiet corridors, and somewhere far above, a guard watches the dark countryside beneath a sky filled with endless stars. What was it really like to spend a night here? Without electricity, without modern comforts, surrounded by mystery, faith, and the constant possibility of danger. As fires fade and the castle drifts into sleep, hidden stories begin to awaken. Whispered prayers, secret conversations, restless dreams, and the soft sounds of a world long gone. So settle in, relax, and let your mind travel back through time to experience a peaceful night inside a medieval castle. As twilight descended across the medieval countryside, the great castle slowly transformed from a bustling centre of daily activity into a guarded sanctuary against the uncertainties of night. From a distance, its thick stone walls rose like a dark mountain against the fading sky. Towers crowned with battlements cutting sharp silhouettes against streaks of orange and purple. Smoke drifted from chimneys where kitchens worked through their final preparations, and torches flickered to life one by one along curtain walls, gateways, and inner courtyards. The air cooled quickly once the sun disappeared, and the heavy stones that had absorbed warmth during the day began releasing damp chill into every corridor, chamber, and stairwell. Night inside a medieval castle was not quiet in the modern sense. Instead, it carried a layered symphony of guarded movement, whispered conversations, distant clanging metal, restless animals, and the constant awareness that darkness beyond the walls held danger. The castle gates, massive oak doors reinforced with iron bands, were among the first elements secured. As dusk deepened, guards hauled the doors shut with straining effort, while chains rattled and hinges groaned. If the castle possessed a portcullis, the iron lattice would descend slowly into place, its spikes scraping stone as it locked the entrance. Watchmen inspected bolts and locks carefully, because night attacks were real threats. Raiders, rival, lords, thieves, or desperate travellers seeking entry could appear under cover of darkness. Once sealed, the castle became a self-contained world, isolated from forests, fields, and villages outside. In the outer bailey, stable boys hurried to finish their duties before full night fell. Horses stamped and snorted in straw, lined stalls, their breath forming clouds in the cooling air. Saddles were hung, hooves cleaned, and feed distributed. Dogs barked intermittently, sensing movement beyond human perception, while chickens and geese settled into uneasy sleep. The smell of hay, mixed with manure, leather, and smoke, created a scent unmistakably tied to medieval life. Nearby, armourers and blacksmith assistants completed last, minute repairs under dim torchlight, hammering softened metal into shape before the fires were banked for the night. Inside the great hall, evening remained lively long after darkness claimed the countryside. The hall was the social heart of the castle, illuminated by rushlights, oil lamps, and roaring fireplaces that cast dancing shadows across stone walls hung with tapestries. These tapestries were not merely decoration but insulation against cold draughts, creeping through mortar gaps. Lords, ladies, knights, and guests gathered at long wooden tables for supper, which often represented the most substantial meal of the day. Servants carried platters of roasted meats, thick stews, coarse bread, cheese, and ale. The clatter of wooden trenchers and metal cups filled the room while musicians played lutes or fiddles in the background. Conversation flowed freely. Knights discussed politics, land disputes, and rumors of war. Travelers shared news from distant regions, making the castle a vital center of information exchange. Stories of miracles, monsters, saints, and battles entertained listeners who lived in a world where myth and reality blended seamlessly. Laughter erupted at jokes or performances by jesters, whose role extended beyond humor. They could speak truths disguised as comedy, commenting on power without direct offense. Yet beneath the warmth of firelight lingered hierarchy. Seating positions reflected strict social order. The Lord's table stood elevated, emphasizing authority even during relaxation. As supper concluded, servants cleared leftovers quickly. Though little food was wasted, scraps went to servants or animals, reinforcing the castle's efficient survival system. Floors were swept with bundled reeds, though cleanliness by modern standards was impossible. Smoke clung to clothing and hair, and the scent of sweat, wool, and burning fat remained constant companions of castle inhabitants. Night prayers followed for many residents. Christianity shaped daily rhythm, and chapels within castles offered space for reflection before sleep. Candles illuminated stone altars as priests or chaplains led prayers asking protection through the night. Darkness carried spiritual as well as physical fears. Many believed evil forces roamed after sunset. Demons, restless spirits, or divine tests awaiting sinful souls. Prayer provided psychological security against the unknown. Meanwhile, guards began their long vigil. Torches burned along ramparts, where sentries paced slowly, cloaked against cold winds. Their responsibility was immense. A single moment of inattention could allow disaster. They scanned horizons for movement, listening for unusual sounds, breaking branches, distant hoofbeats, or the faint splash of someone crossing a moat. Communication relied on horns, bells, or shouted warnings. Some guards fought sleep by talking quietly, while others stamped their feet to maintain circulation during freezing nights. Within the Lord's private chambers, life grew quieter, but no less complex. These rooms offered relative luxury compared to the rest of the castle. Thicker tapestries, carved furniture, feather beds, and sometimes glass windows if wealth allowed. Even so, warmth remained uneven, and braziers filled rooms with smoke alongside heat. The lord or lady might review documents by candlelight, discuss alliances with advisors, or plan future campaigns. Marriage arrangements, taxation decisions, and legal judgments shaping hundreds of lives often emerged from conversations held during such evenings. Noblewomen supervised household management even at night. Inventories were checked, servants assigned next day duties, and textile work continued under dim light. Embroidery, weaving, or letter writing occupied hours that modern entertainment would now fill. Literacy was rare, so those who could read possessed considerable influence, managing correspondence that maintained political networks across kingdoms. Servants' quarters contrasted sharply with noble chambers. Many slept communally on straw mattresses or simple pallets. sometimes sharing warmth with others to survive cold seasons. Privacy was almost non-existent. Exhausted from labor beginning before dawn, most fell asleep quickly, despite noise echoing through stone corridors. Snoring, murmured dreams, coughing and shifting bodies formed a human soundtrack of collective rest. Fleas and lice were constant annoyances, and sleep often involved scratching and repositioning rather than uninterrupted comfort. Children experienced castle nights differently depending on status. Noble children might hear bedtime stories from nurses or tutors, tales of heroic knights and saints, shaping their understanding of honor and faith. Peasant, born pages or servants, in training, however, learned discipline early, sleeping near work areas to respond instantly if summoned. Education occurred through observation. Watching adults handle nighttime responsibilities prepared them for future roles. The castle's architecture influenced nighttime experience profoundly. Narrow spiral staircases forced movement in single file, their uneven steps dangerous in low light. Echoes travelled easily through stone passageways, amplifying minor sounds into mysterious disturbances. Wind whistled through arrow slits, creating eerie tones mistaken for voices or supernatural presence. Many inhabitants genuinely believed castles housed ghosts, fallen warriors, betrayed lovers, or former lords lingering between worlds. Beyond human life, animals contributed to nighttime atmosphere. Cats hunted rodents in storerooms, protecting precious grain supplies. Owls circled towers silently, while bats darted through courtyards catching insects attracted to torchlight. Occasionally wolves howled from surrounding forests, reminding everyone of nature's proximity and the fragile boundary separating civilization from wilderness. Medical concerns often surfaced at night. Without modern healthcare, illness or injury could become deadly quickly. A sick child developing fever, a knight nursing infected wounds, or a servant suffering toothache might summon healers using herbal remedies and prayer. Candles burned beside beds as family members kept vigil, aware that many lives ended quietly during darkness. Death was familiar, not hidden away as in later centuries. Weather dramatically shaped castle nights. Storms transformed stone structures into resonating chambers where thunder rolled like siege engines. Rain hammered roofs, leaked through cracks, and turned courtyards into mud. During winter, frost crept across walls, freezing water buckets and stiffening blankets. Summer nights, by contrast, carried warmth mixed with insects and lingering smells intensified by heat. Each season altered routines, yet reinforced the castle's role as shelter against unpredictable elements. Security extended beyond physical defense to political anxiety. Medieval lords constantly feared betrayal. Trusted guards rotated shifts carefully to prevent conspiracies. Doors to private chambers were barred, and weapons remained within reach even during sleep. Assassination attempts were not myths, but genuine risks in a world governed by shifting loyalties. Late at night, the castle gradually entered its deepest silence. Fires burned low. Conversations faded, and only occasional footsteps disturbed stillness. Moonlight filtered through narrow windows, painting pale shapes across floors somewhere. A monk copied manuscripts by candlelight, preserving knowledge through painstaking effort. Elsewhere, a sleepless night reflected on battles fought, or yet to come, listening to wind brushing stone. Yet, even in apparent calm, the castle never truly slept. Guards changed watch hours marked by bells. As midnight settled fully over the castle, the world outside seemed to vanish into an endless ocean of darkness, broken only by starlight and the occasional glow of distant village fires. Within the fortress, however, life continued in quieter, more intimate ways that rarely appeared in heroic chronicles or romantic legends. The great stone structure, so formidable during daylight, became almost alive at night, breathing slowly through draughts that slipped beneath doors and whispered along corridors. Candles burned unevenly, dripping wax onto iron holders, while shadows stretched and shrank across walls, decorated with faded banners and shields, bearing family crests earned through generations of conflict and alliance. In the kitchens, a few servants remained awake, long after supper ended. Large hearth fires were reduced but never fully extinguished, since rekindling flames from cold embers in the morning required valuable time and effort. Kitchen workers cleaned cooking pots using sand or ash, scraping away grease accumulated from roasting meats. The smell of onions, garlic, smoke, and animal fat lingered heavily in the air. Bread dough prepared earlier rested beneath cloth coverings, slowly rising overnight in preparation for dawn baking. Even rest involved labor. The castle demanded readiness at every hour. High above, in narrow towers, scribes sometimes worked through the night. These individuals copied religious texts, legal records, or correspondence, using quill pens dipped carefully into ink. Their work required patience and precision, illuminated only by fragile candlelight that strained the eyes. Mistakes meant wasted parchment, an expensive resource made from animal skins. Outside the windows, wind pressed against shutters, while distant clouds crossed the moon, occasionally plunging the tower into near total darkness. The isolation of such work fostered deep contemplation, and many scribes recorded marginal drawings or private reflections that historians centuries later would discover as glimpses into medieval thought. In guest chambers, travellers adjusted uneasily to castle sleeping conditions. Even wealthy guests found rest challenging. Mattresses stuffed with straw or feathers shifted unpredictably, and unfamiliar nighttime sounds prevented deep sleep. Footsteps echoed unpredictably, doors creaked without warning, and somewhere a guard's spear butt striking stone during patrol echoed like distant knocking. Many visitors kept small knives beneath pillows, not necessarily from fear of hosts, but from habit developed in a dangerous world. For soldiers stationed within the castle, night brought both relief and tension. After long training sessions or patrols, some gathered quietly near secondary fires, sharing watered wine or ale while recounting battles, boasting about victories or confessing private fears. Rarely spoken during daylight. Armor rested nearby, polished but ready. These men understood how quickly peace could dissolve into violence. Even during apparent calm, armor straps were kept close, swords within arm's reach, and boots positioned for immediate use. Occasionally, alarms interrupted the stillness. A dog barking repeatedly, a flicker of movement near the outer wall, or an unfamiliar sound from the forest could trigger sudden alertness. Guards would tighten grips on weapons, horns prepared to sound warning signals. Most alarms proved harmless. Wandering animals, shifting branches, or drunken villagers approaching too close. But each moment reinforced the fragile safety provided by stone walls and human vigilance. The castle chapel often remained one of the most peaceful places during night hours. A single candle burning before religious icons symbolized continuous prayer even when people slept. Monks or priests sometimes maintained vigil, reciting psalms in low voices that echoed gently across vaulted ceilings. Their chants blended with nighttime sounds, creating an atmosphere both calming and mysterious. For medieval inhabitants, faith provided explanation for suffering and uncertainty. Night encouraged reflection on mortality, salvation, and divine judgment. Thoughts intensified by the darkness surrounding human life. In hidden corners of the castle, personal stories unfolded quietly. Young lovers exchanged secret conversations in corridors. Servants whispered about dreams of freedom or marriage, and apprentices imagined futures beyond castle service. Not all life revolved around war or hierarchy. Human longing persisted even within rigid social structures. A maid might gaze through an arrow slit toward distant hills, wondering what lay beyond her lifelong workplace. A young squire might rehearse heroic speeches alone, dreaming of knighthood and recognition. Medical caretakers sometimes walked silently through halls, checking on the ill. Herbal scents, lavender, rosemary, sage, filled certain chambers where remedies were prepared. Feverish patients sweated beneath wool blankets while attendants cooled foreheads with damp cloths. Without understanding germs or infection, healers relied on tradition, prayer, and observation. Recovery often seemed miraculous. Death, when it came, was accepted as part of divine will. The quiet grief of nighttime losses rarely disturbed the entire castle, but deeply affected families gathered around dimly lit bedsides. The castle's defensive design revealed its importance most clearly at night. Moats reflected moonlight like black mirrors, discouraging unseen approach. Drawbridges remained raised, leaving attackers exposed if they dared attempt entry. Murder holes above gateways stood ready to pour boiling water, sand, or stones upon invaders. Archers' positions along battlements allowed defenders to fire downward while remaining protected. Every architectural feature represented centuries of learning born from siege warfare. Even when no enemy threatened, these structures reminded inhabitants that safety was earned through preparation. Deep night also revealed nature's dominance. Mist crept across courtyards, blurring outlines of towers and statues. Frost formed delicate patterns on exposed surfaces during cold seasons. The smell of wet stone intensified, and silence grew heavier between wind gusts. Stars appeared extraordinarily bright without artificial lighting, encouraging contemplation of cosmic order. Medieval people often interpreted celestial events as omens. An unusually bright star or passing comet might spark intense discussion the following day. Some individuals struggled with sleep due to superstition. Folklore warned against spirits active during certain hours. Stories of witches, wandering souls, or cursed locations circulated widely. A flickering candle or unexplained sound could awaken genuine fear. Protective charms, crosses, or relics were kept near beds as reassurance. Even hardened warriors sometimes muttered prayers before closing their eyes. Time itself felt different during medieval nights. Without precise clocks, people measured hours through church bells, guard rotations, or personal routines. Night divided into watches, each lasting several hours. Guards announcing the change of watch created continuity, reminding everyone that vigilance continued despite exhaustion. Human life aligned closely with natural cycles rather than artificial schedules. As the night moved toward its coldest hours before dawn, the castle entered a strange stillness. Fires burned low, breath fogged in unheated corridors, and most inhabitants slept deeply. Yet early workers began stirring, bakers kneading dough, servants fetching water from wells, and monks preparing morning prayers. Their movements signaled the approaching transition from night's introspection to day's activity. The first light of morning crept gradually across the horizon, turning black skies to deep blue. Birds awakened in nearby trees, and faint colour returned to stone walls that had seemed almost alive in darkness. Guards who had stood watch all night felt relief as visibility improved. Gates prepared to reopen, reconnecting the castle with surrounding lands. Farmers would soon arrive seeking protection or trade. Messengers carrying news would pass through, and the rhythms of governance and survival would resume. A night inside a medieval castle revealed more than protection against external threats. It exposed the emotional landscape of an entire society. Within those walls existed ambition, devotion, exhaustion, love, fear, and hope intertwined beneath flickering firelight. The castle was not merely a fortress, but a living organism sustained by hundreds of individuals whose lives overlapped through shared space and shared vulnerability. Each night represented both refuge and reminder. Refuge from dangers outside, and reminder that human life, however powerful its walls, remained temporary within the vast flow of history. After the final watch of the night began, a peculiar stillness settled over the castle that few daytime visitors could ever imagine. The lively fortress of daylight, filled with merchants, training knights, shouting servants, and echoing commands, now felt suspended between worlds. Darkness wrapped the towers like a cloak, muting colours and softening shapes, until stone walls seemed ancient beyond memory. Only the glow of scattered torches revealed that life continued within. In remote corners of the castle, embers glowed faintly in fireplaces, releasing soft cracking sounds as wood slowly collapsed into ash. These small fires were carefully maintained because fire itself was both necessity and danger. An unattended spark could destroy an entire fortress built mostly of timber interiors, despite stone exteriors. Night watchmen assigned specifically to fire duty moved quietly through corridors inspecting hearths, ensuring flames were controlled. They carried lanterns, shielded by horn panels, their footsteps deliberate, their eyes trained to notice smoke before disaster could begin. The castle's storage chambers were among the most guarded spaces at night. Deep cellars held barrels of grain, salted meat, dried fish, wine and ale, supplies essential for survival during sieges or harsh winters. Rats attempted nightly invasions, gnawing at sacks and creeping along beams. Cats prowled tirelessly. Silent hunters maintaining balance between human civilization and persistent nature. The faint scratching of claws or squeaking echoes often startled passing servants unfamiliar with the sounds, reminding them how thin the boundary was between order and decay. Down in the armory, rows of weapons rested in shadow. Spears leaned against walls, shields stacked carefully, swords hung in organized lines, reflecting torchlight with dull gleams. Armor, freshly cleaned after training or patrol, emitted the faint smell of oil and metal. Even at rest, the armory symbolized readiness. Many castles maintained guards sleeping nearby, specifically so weapons could be distributed instantly if danger arose. Some soldiers dreamed uneasily beside their equipment, hands instinctively reaching for hilts, even in sleep shaped by years of discipline and expectation. The castle's wells and water systems required attention throughout the night as well. Water was life, needed for drinking, cooking, animals, and extinguishing fire. Servants assigned to early morning duties sometimes began work long before dawn, drawing buckets in rhythmic motion. The echo of rope against stone shafts carried upward, blending with the distant murmur of wind. In winter, ice forming along well edges demanded constant braking, a reminder that even the simplest resource required labour. Meanwhile, within noble apartments, dreams reflected the burdens of leadership. Lords responsible for land, justice, and military defence rarely slept without worry. Political alliances could shift overnight. A neighbouring lord might rebel, a king might summon troops, or taxes might fail to arrive. Letters received earlier in the day often lingered in memory, their implications unfolding during restless sleep. Medieval power carried constant anxiety. Authority meant responsibility for hundreds or thousands of lives. Ladies of the castle often awakened during night hours to oversee infants or young children. Noble families faced high infant mortality, and mothers or nurses checked breathing frequently, adjusting blankets or whispering prayers for protection. The quiet bond between caregiver and child existed far removed from the formal ceremonies and rigid etiquette visible during daylight. Night revealed vulnerability shared across all social ranks. Elsewhere, apprentices and young pages sometimes slipped from beds unable to sleep. They gazed from narrow windows at moonlit courtyards, imagining adventures described by travelling storytellers. For many youths, castles represented both opportunity and confinement. Training promised advancement, perhaps knighthood, literacy, or skilled craftsmanship, but also demanded obedience and patience. The silent hours allowed imagination to wander beyond stone walls toward unknown futures. Outside along the ramparts, guards experienced the night most intensely. Wind struck exposed towers with relentless force, carrying scents of forest, damp earth, and distant water. Clouds occasionally revealed the moon, illuminating fields below with silver light. From such heights, the world seemed enormous and mysterious. Guards listened carefully because sound travelled differently at night. A single hoofbeat could carry across miles. Some guards sang quietly to stay awake. Old songs passed down through generations of soldiers. Weather often shaped emotional atmosphere. A foggy night created unease, reducing visibility and amplifying fear of hidden approach. Clear winter nights brought biting cold so severe that armour felt frozen against skin. Summer nights buzzed with insects drawn to torchlight, while warm air carried distant laughter from villages celebrating festivals beyond castle authority. Each season changed how the castle breathed and how its inhabitants experienced darkness. In servant quarters, dreams mixed with exhaustion. Many servants had risen before sunrise and laboured continuously, yet sleep was rarely uninterrupted. Someone coughing, a crying infant, or a call from a superior could end rest instantly. Despite hardships, these communal spaces also fostered companionship. Shared struggles created bonds stronger than formal loyalty. Whispered conversations before sleep often revolved around small hopes, better assignments, marriage prospects, or rare days of celebration. Some nights included storytelling traditions preserved across centuries. Older servants or soldiers recounted legends learned from their parents. Tales of heroic ancestors defending the castle during legendary sieges. Stories of hidden treasure buried beneath towers, or warnings about cursed chambers never to be entered alone. These narratives served entertainment, but also reinforced identity, connecting present inhabitants with past generations who had lived and died within the same walls. The castle infirmary held its own unique atmosphere. Lamps burned softly beside patients, recovering from wounds or illness. The smell of herbs mingled with sweat and damp linen. Healers checked pulses, adjusted bandages, or whispered comforting words. Medieval medicine blended observation, superstition, and spiritual belief. Recovery often depended as much on resilience and luck as treatment. Families kept vigil through long nights, measuring hope in each breath taken by loved ones. As hours passed, animals began sensing the coming dawn before humans could perceive it. Horses shifted in stalls, restless energy returning. Dogs lifted heads, ears alert to subtle environmental changes. Birds hidden among stone crevices stirred faintly. These small movements gradually transformed the castle's stillness into anticipation. The darkest moment of night, the period just before dawn, felt strangely profound. Many medieval people believed this hour carried spiritual significance, a time when prayers held special power, and when evil forces weakened as light approached. Monks rose for early prayer offices, their footsteps echoing softly toward the chapel. The sound of chanting resumed, slow and steady, marking humanity's attempt to impose rhythm upon unpredictable existence. Gradually, the sky lightened. A thin grey glow crept along the horizon, revealing outlines previously swallowed by darkness. Torches burned low, no longer needed as natural light returned. Guards stretched stiff muscles, relieved to have completed another night safely. Servants prepared to awaken the castle fully, opening shutters, rekindling large fires, and sweeping halls before nobles emerged. When the gates finally opened, morning air rushed inward, carrying scents of dew, covered grass, and distant farmland. The castle transitioned once again from protected refuge to active centre of medieval life. Yet those who had lived through the night understood something deeper. Every sunrise represented continuity achieved through cooperation, vigilance, and endurance. A night inside a medieval castle was therefore more than a passage of time. It was an intricate balance between fear and security, solitude and community, silence and constant preparation. Within those towering walls, humanity revealed itself in its purest form. People bound together against darkness, sustained by faith, duty, and shared survival, awaiting each dawn as both victory and beginning. Long after the castle appeared asleep, another layer of nighttime existence unfolded quietly, almost invisibly, known only to those who lived within its walls every day. The heavy silence that settled across corridors was never complete silence. Rather, it was filled with subtle movements and living sounds that blended into a rhythm recognizable to medieval ears. A wooden beam contracting in the cold might crack softly, sounding like distant footsteps. Wind slipping through arrow slits created low humming tones that rose and fell like breath. The castle seemed less like an object, and more like an ancient creature resting yet always aware. Deep within underground chambers, darkness was absolute. Storage vaults, wine cellars, and occasionally prison cells lay far below the warmth of living quarters. The smell here was different: cool earth, damp stone, aging wood, and fermented drink. Wine barrels expanded and contracted with temperature changes, producing faint popping noises. Guards assigned to watch prisoners experienced the longest nights of all, sitting beside iron-barred doors with only a lantern for company. They listened to murmured prayers, quiet sobbing, or sometimes eerie silence from those awaiting judgment. Time moved slowly in such places, measured only by dripping water echoing through stone tunnels. Some castles contained hidden passages known only to trusted members of the household. These narrow corridors allowed movement between chambers without crossing public spaces, serving both security and secrecy. During the night, messengers or attendants occasionally moved through these concealed routes carrying urgent information or responding to private summons. The sensation of walking alone through tight, unlit passageways heightened awareness of every breath and step, reinforcing how easily fear could grow within confined darkness. In towers overlooking vast lands, astronomically minded monks or scholars sometimes observed the night sky. Medieval people watched stars carefully, believing celestial movements reflected divine order or future events. A clear night provided extraordinary visibility. Without modern lights, constellations appeared intensely bright. Observers recorded positions of planets, lunar phases, and unusual phenomena such as meteor showers or eclipses. These observations blended science, religion, and astrology into a unified worldview where heaven and earth remained deeply connected. Back in residential areas, sleepless individuals wandered quietly through halls for personal reasons rarely documented in history. A grieving widow unable to rest might walk toward the chapel seeking comfort. A knight troubled by memories of battle might stand alone near battlements, gazing outward into darkness, as if searching for answers beyond human reach. Emotional struggles existed in every era, though expressed differently. The night granted privacy for thoughts too heavy to share during daylight responsibilities. In servant kitchens, leftover warmth from the hearth became a gathering place for those whose duties required late or early shifts. A cook preparing broth for the next day might share stories with a stable hand finishing chores. These quiet conversations often revealed the truest social atmosphere of the castle, less formal, more honest than interactions in the great hall. Laughter whispered near dying fires contrasted with the rigid hierarchy enforced during daylight hours. The castle's animals continued shaping the night's experience. Falcons resting in mews occasionally stirred, feathers rustling softly. Hunting hounds dreamed and twitched, chasing imaginary prey. In barns, cattle shifted heavily against wooden stalls. These sounds reminded inhabitants that survival depended not only on human effort, but on animals integrated into daily life. Even mice scurrying through walls contributed to the castle's constant sense of motion. Sometimes travellers arrived late, seeking shelter before dawn. A guarded knock at the gate would interrupt routine, prompting cautious evaluation. Guards questioned strangers through small openings before deciding whether to grant entry. Hospitality existed alongside suspicion, offering shelter aligned with moral duty, yet caution protected against spies or thieves. Such arrivals added brief bursts of activity to otherwise predictable nighttime rhythms. The sensory experience of a medieval castle night differed profoundly from modern expectations. Darkness was truly dark. Without electric light, visibility depended entirely on fire and moonlight. Colours faded into shades of grey and black. Smell became more pronounced. The sharp scent of tallow candles, smoke embedded in tapestries, damp wool clothing drying near fires. Sound carried further, making whispered conversations seem louder and distant movements strangely close. Fear played an undeniable role in shaping behaviour after sunset. Bandits, wild animals, disease, and political enemies all belonged to the realm of real possibility. Yet alongside fear existed deep trust among inhabitants who relied on each other for safety. Guards trusted cooks to feed them. Servants trusted soldiers to defend them. Nobles trusted advisors for counsel. The castle functioned because cooperation balanced hierarchy. Dreams held special importance in medieval thought. Many believed dreams contained divine messages or warnings. Morning conversations often included discussions of visions experienced overnight. A dream about water, fire, or certain animals might influence decisions or inspire religious interpretation. Night therefore extended beyond physical rest into spiritual and psychological territory, where imagination and belief intertwined. During colder months, groups sometimes slept together in shared spaces to conserve warmth. The collective presence of breathing bodies created comfort against harsh temperatures. Fires were carefully rationed, blankets layered, and shutters closed tightly. Frost sometimes formed on interior stone walls, sparkling faintly in torchlight. People awoke periodically to adjust coverings or add wood to braziers, creating fragmented sleep patterns very different from modern continuous rest. The castle also served as a place of preparation. Soldiers scheduled for campaigns used nighttime hours to reflect or quietly sharpen weapons. Apprentices rehearsed skills learned during the day. Musicians practiced softly, composing melodies inspired by solitude. Even administrators reviewed accounts or drafted letters when uninterrupted concentration became possible. Night offered a rare opportunity for focused work free from constant interruption. Stormy nights transformed the castle dramatically. Lightning illuminated towers in sudden flashes, revealing details hidden by darkness. Thunder rolled across stone surfaces like approaching armies. Rainwater rushed through drainage channels carved into walls centuries earlier. Some inhabitants felt secure hearing storms rage outside, grateful for shelter. Others lay awake, anxious about structural damage or flooded storage areas. Weather intensified emotional awareness of both safety and vulnerability. As hours progressed toward morning, fatigue deepened among night workers. Guards leaned briefly against walls while remaining alert. Servants stretched sore muscles, and monks completed final prayers before sunrise rituals. The castle's energy slowly shifted from introspection to anticipation. The quiet labor performed overnight ensured smooth functioning once daylight returned. The first faint sounds of waking life arrived subtly. A baker opening an oven door released warm light into darkness. Water splashing into basins signaled preparation for washing. Somewhere, a bell rang softly, marking early devotion. Birds, nesting along rooftops, began tentative chirps, growing louder as light strengthened. Gradually, human voices joined natural sounds, and the castle awakened not abruptly, but through gentle accumulation of activity. Looking back across those hours, a night inside a medieval castle revealed countless layers invisible to outsiders. It was a time when social roles softened, when personal emotions surfaced, and when the massive fortress served less as symbol of power and more as shared shelter against uncertainty. Within stone walls, hundreds of individuals experienced solitude together, each person alone in thought, yet connected through collective survival. By dawn, evidence of the night disappeared quickly. Fires roared again, servants hurried through halls, nobles prepared for governance, and visitors entered bustling courtyards. Yet, the memory of night lingered subtly in tired eyes, quiet reflections, and renewed appreciation for safety earned through vigilance. Every night passed without disaster strengthened belief in order and divine protection, reinforcing the rhythm that defined medieval existence: labor, rest, fear, faith, and the endless return of light after darkness. When the castle reached the deepest portion of night, a strange intimacy settled over every chamber, hallway, and tower. This was the hour when even the most disciplined routines loosened slightly, when the structure of medieval life softened beneath exhaustion and reflection. The massive fortress that represented authority, war, and power during the day now became a place of fragile humanity. Torch flames burned lower, shadows stretched longer, and the silence felt heavier, almost sacred. In the long corridors lined with worn stone, the faint glow of wall torches created shifting patterns that made statues and armor displays appear alive. A suit of armor placed for decoration or remembrance might cast a shadow resembling a standing figure, startling servants passing alone. Many castles were filled with such illusions, and people accustomed to superstition interpreted them through stories of spirits guarding ancestral homes. Even rational individuals occasionally hurried their steps when crossing dark passageways, unwilling to linger where imagination could grow too vivid. Near the great hall, the last embers of the evening fire radiated gentle warmth. The massive room that earlier echoed with laughter, political discussion, and music now stood nearly empty. Tables cleared of food revealed knife marks carved by generations of diners. Benches remained slightly askew, abandoned after long meals. Above, banners hung motionless, representing victories achieved decades or centuries earlier. At night, The hall felt less like a centre of celebration and more like a memory preserved in stone. A reminder of how many lives had passed through the same space. In upper chambers, candlelight flickered behind thick wooden doors. Some nobles preferred late night reading or quiet conversation, enjoying rare privacy away from formal expectations. Letters from distant allies might be reread carefully, seals inspected, and responses drafted thoughtfully. Political strategy often unfolded in these quiet hours when interruptions were unlikely. Decisions affecting entire regions could begin as whispered discussions beside small flames battling darkness. The sounds of craftsmanship occasionally continued long past midnight. A tailor finishing repairs on expensive garments worked under dim light, fingers moving patiently despite fatigue. A carpenter might carve delicate details into furniture ordered by the Lord. These artisans balanced deadlines with limited daylight, using night time to complete tasks essential to castle prestige. Their dedication revealed how every visible luxury depended on unseen labour performed in silence. Some inhabitants experienced night as a time of loneliness. Travellers separated from families lay awake listening to unfamiliar sounds. Young servants newly arrived at the castle missed home villages and familiar faces. The isolation of thick walls could intensify homesickness, especially during long winters when travel became impossible. Night magnified emotion. Thoughts that could be ignored during busy daylight returned strongly when activity ceased. In defensive towers, guards faced psychological challenges as much as physical ones. Standing alone against vast darkness required discipline. Human senses strained to interpret distant movement. Was that wind through grass or approaching footsteps? A reflection on water or metal could resemble firelight from an unseen enemy. Guards learned to balance caution with calm, resisting panic while maintaining readiness. Their vigilance symbolized the thin line separating safety from vulnerability. Some castles maintained signal fires prepared for emergency communication with nearby strongholds. These beacons, unlit most nights, represented an ancient network of warning, capable of spreading news across great distances rapidly. Guards occasionally checked materials prepared for ignition, dry wood, pitch, and kindling ready to blaze if invasion threatened. The quiet inspection of such preparations reinforced awareness that peace could vanish instantly. Inside sleeping quarters, the experience of rest varied widely. Nobles slept on raised beds surrounded by curtains designed to retain warmth and offer privacy. Servants lay closer to floors where cold gathered, wrapped tightly in blankets. The shared human need for sleep united all social ranks, yet comfort differed dramatically. Dreams drifted through the castle simultaneously, visions shaped by ambition, fear, love, or faith. The chapel remained one of the few places where night never fully claimed darkness. A sanctuary lamp or candle burned continuously, symbolizing divine presence. Occasionally, an insomniac knight or grieving widow entered quietly to pray alone, kneeling before sacred images. Individuals confronted personal worries hidden beneath public roles. The chapel offered emotional refuge where rank mattered less than sincerity. Castle physicians or healers sometimes used night hours for preparing remedies. Herbs gathered during the day were dried, ground, or mixed into salves under careful supervision. Mortars struck softly against stone surfaces, releasing strong medicinal scents. Knowledge passed through generations guided these practices, blending empirical observation with spiritual belief. Healing itself felt sacred, an attempt to cooperate with forces beyond human control. Outside, the surrounding landscape influenced the castle's emotional atmosphere. Forests appeared impenetrable under moonlight. Fields turned silver with dew, and rivers reflected stars like moving mirrors. Occasionally, distant travelers' lanterns could be seen along roads, tiny signs of life beyond walls. Such sights reminded guards and watchers that the castle was only one refuge within a vast and unpredictable world. Wildlife intensified nighttime awareness. Foxes cried sharply in the distance, owls called from treetops, and insects formed a constant low hum. These natural sounds blended with human activity until boundaries between civilization and wilderness blurred. Medieval people lived much closer to nature's rhythms. They recognized seasonal changes through nighttime sounds long before sunrise confirmed them. Some nights brought celebration rather than quiet. Festivals, victories, or visiting dignitaries extended activity well into darkness. Musicians played longer. Dancers moved across torchlit courtyards, and laughter echoed between towers. Even during such joyful nights, guards remained alert, balancing celebration with security. The contrast between merriment and vigilance defined castle life. Joy never replaced responsibility. As the hours advanced, fatigue created moments of unexpected vulnerability. A servant might doze briefly beside a fire. A guard lean momentarily against a wall, or a scholar pause, writing as eyelids grew heavy. These small human weaknesses emphasized that castles, despite their strength, depended entirely on the endurance of ordinary people. The approach of dawn introduced subtle transformation. Darkness softened gradually rather than disappearing suddenly. The eastern horizon grew pale, revealing shapes hidden for hours. Mist lifted from moats and fields, and birdsong expanded steadily. Those awake during this transition often felt privileged, witnessing a quiet rebirth invisible to late sleepers. Kitchen staff became among the first to fully reawaken the castle. Fires roared back to life, iron pots clanged, and fresh bread aromas spread through corridors. The comforting smell signaled continuity. Another day beginning successfully after surviving the uncertainties of night. Guards ending shifts exchanged brief greetings with replacements, sharing reports of uneventful watches with quiet relief. By sunrise, the castle returned to structured order. Commands echoed, horses prepared for travel, and merchants gathered near gates awaiting entry. The emotional intimacy of night faded behind practical demands, yet the memory of darkness lingered within everyone who had experienced it. The night that beneath ceremony and power lay shared dependence on vigilance, cooperation, and hope. A night inside a medieval castle was therefore not merely darkness between 2 days, but a world unto itself. It revealed the castle's true identity, not only a fortress or residence, but a living community bound together by necessity. Within those walls, every creak, whisper, prayer, and heartbeat formed part of a collective effort to endure uncertainty. Night exposed vulnerability, while simultaneously strengthening unity, reminding all inhabitants, from lord to servant, that survival depended on one another as much as on stone walls rising against the endless medieval sky. As the night stretched onward beyond what most inhabitants consciously experienced, the castle entered a phase that felt almost detached from ordinary time. The routines of human life slowed, yet the presence of the fortress itself became more noticeable. Stone walls retained centuries of memory, worn smooth by countless hands, boots, and passing generations. In darkness, history seemed closer. Those awake during these hours often felt as though they shared the castle not only with the living but with echoes of everyone who had ever walked its halls. Along narrow walkways connecting towers, guards sometimes paused briefly to listen. Not merely for danger, but to understand the night itself. Wind moving across battlements produced deep tones that varied depending on direction and speed, creating sounds almost musical. Experienced watchmen learned to distinguish ordinary noises from unusual ones. The sudden absence of familiar sounds could be more alarming than loud disturbances. Silence where animals should be active sometimes suggested movement beyond the walls, sharpening attention instantly. Within chambers occupied by scholars or clergy, candles burned nearly to their bases as manuscripts continued to grow line by line. Medieval intellectual work required endurance. Copying texts, translating religious writings, or recording legal matters demanded long hours of concentration. Ink-stained fingers, tired eyes, and cramped posture were accepted sacrifices in preserving knowledge. Many texts that survived into modern times were written during such quiet nights, created while the rest of the castle slept unaware of the cultural legacy forming nearby. Some members of the household experienced divided sleep patterns common in medieval Europe. Rather than sleeping continuously, people often rested for several hours, woke during the middle of the night, and then returned to sleep before dawn. This waking interval became a private time for prayer, conversation, or reflection. Couples spoke quietly about family concerns. Servants mended clothing, and individuals contemplated personal decisions. The darkness encouraged honesty, rarely possible during busy daytime interactions. In defensive courtyards, moonlight transformed familiar spaces into landscapes of shadow and silver. Training grounds that earlier rang with clashing swords now lay empty, footprints frozen in dust or frost. Wells reflected pale light, appearing deeper than usual. Statues honoring saints or ancestors gained an almost supernatural presence, their features softened by darkness. The castle seemed larger at night, as if silence expanded every space. Occasionally, patrols ventured beyond inner walls to inspect outer defences. Crossing a drawbridge in darkness required courage. Beyond the gatehouse lay vulnerability. Guards checked perimeter ditches, listened near forest edges, and verified that no hidden threats approached. These patrols reinforced the psychological boundary between safety inside and uncertainty outside. Returning through secured gates brought immediate relief, emphasizing the fortress's protective role. In living quarters, dreams shaped emotional experience as powerfully as waking events. Nights relived battles, sometimes waking suddenly at imagined danger. Children dreamed of stories heard at supper, dragons, saints, heroes, and distant kingdoms blending into vivid imagination. Dreams were often discussed openly because medieval society treated them as meaningful experiences, rather than random mental activity. A dream interpreted as divine warning could influence real decisions the following day. Meanwhile, the castle's economic machinery never fully stopped. Mill workers attached to the estate sometimes operated water mills overnight when river flow was strongest. Bakers prepared large batches of bread requiring early fermentation. Stable attendants monitored pregnant animals expected to give birth before morning. These quiet forms of labor ensured prosperity and survival, revealing that medieval wealth depended on continuous effort rather than occasional grand events. The emotional atmosphere of night also encouraged confession and reconciliation. Disputes unresolved during the day sometimes softened in darkness. Two servants might quietly apologize after an argument, or family members resolved tension away from public scrutiny. Without the pressure of audience or authority, people found space for vulnerability. Night reduced social performance, allowing genuine human connection to emerge. Weather changes became especially dramatic after midnight. A sudden fog rolling across the land could envelop towers entirely, isolating guards within small circles of visibility. Rain beginning softly might grow into relentless downpour echoing through gutters and stone channels engineered to protect foundations. Snowfall transformed the castle into near silence, absorbing sound until footsteps felt muffled and distant. Each weather shift altered mood and movement, reminding inhabitants that nature remained the ultimate power. In darker corners of the fortress, fear sometimes took subtle forms. Superstitions warned against wandering alone during certain hours, believed to belong to spirits or supernatural forces. Some individuals avoided particular staircases or abandoned rooms associated with tragedy or rumored hauntings. These beliefs were not mere entertainment. They reflected genuine attempts to understand a world filled with unexplained illness, sudden death, and unpredictable fortune. Animals sensed approaching morning earlier than humans. Horses stamped gently, eager for feeding. Dogs lifted heads, ears alert, responding to faint environmental cues. Birds hidden within roof beams began tentative chirping, long before light appeared. Their gradual awakening acted as nature's clock, signaling transition from night's introspection toward day's activity. Inside the kitchens, the first true signs of morning labor intensified. Fires were fully rekindled, sparks rising into chimneys, water boiled, grain ground into porridge, and bread placed into ovens filled corridors with comforting warmth. Servants moved quickly yet quietly, preserving the calm before the castle awakened completely. The smell of baking bread often reached sleeping quarters, subtly pulling inhabitants from dreams. Monastic bells eventually broke the remaining silence. Their measured ringing marked sacred time rather than mechanical hours, aligning human life with spiritual rhythm. Monks gathered for early prayer, their chanting spreading softly through corridors and courtyards. Even those not attending services heard the sound, and recognized another day beginning under divine observation. As light strengthened, the castle shed its nighttime identity. Shadows retreated, revealing practical realities once more. Unfinished repairs, muddy footprints, stacked supplies, awaiting use. Guards reported uneventful watches, grateful that danger had not materialized. Servants opened shutters to admit sunlight, transforming cold stone interiors into livable spaces again. The transition from night to day often brought a subtle emotional shift. Night encouraged introspection, memory, and vulnerability. Daylight demanded action, authority, and productivity. Those who had stayed awake through the dark hours carried private reflections into morning responsibilities. A decision made during sleepless contemplation might influence governance, relationships, or personal choices for years afterward. Thus, a night inside a medieval castle represented far more than rest between labours. It was a hidden dimension of medieval existence, where time slowed, identities softened, and humanity revealed itself beyond formal hierarchy. Behind massive walls, built for defence, lived countless small stories, acts of care, fear, creativity, faith, and endurance, woven together beneath moonlight and torch flame. When the sun finally rose fully above the horizon, illuminating towers with golden light, the castle appeared strong, orderly, and confident once again. Yet its strength did not come solely from stone or weapons. It came from the people who endured each night together, maintaining watch, nurturing hope, preserving knowledge, and trusting that morning would always follow darkness. In this endless cycle of night and dawn, the true life of the medieval castle unfolded, quietly, continuously, and profoundly human. As the final hours before dawn unfolded, the castle existed in a delicate balance between exhaustion and renewal. The darkness no longer felt endless, yet morning had not fully claimed the world. This lingering period, when night still ruled but light quietly prepared its return, held a unique atmosphere known only to those awake through long watches or restless thoughts. The fortress seemed suspended outside ordinary time, its towering walls softened by pale moonlight, fading slowly into grey. In secluded chambers, the last candles burned low, their flames wavering as wax pooled beneath them. Shadows trembled across uneven stone surfaces, creating shifting forms that appeared almost alive. A scholar finishing his work might pause to stretch stiff fingers, gazing briefly through a narrow window at the silent landscape below. In such moments, awareness of isolation became profound. Surrounded by hundreds of sleeping people, one could still feel completely alone, accompanied only by scratching quill strokes and distant wind. The castle's wooden structures responded to temperature changes as night cooled further. Floors creaked gently, beams settled, and shutters rattled faintly. These sounds formed a familiar language to residents, each noise carrying meaning. Long-time inhabitants could identify locations simply by sound. The kitchen door swinging slightly, the armory latch shifting, or a loose stone on the stairway touched by patrolling boots. The castle communicated constantly with those who listened closely. In the great courtyard, mist sometimes gathered before dawn, drifting slowly like low clouds trapped within walls. Torches burned through the haze, their light diffused into soft halos. Guards moving through this mist appeared, ghost-like, emerging and disappearing with every step. Breath rose visibly in cold air, reminding watchers of their own physical presence against the vast stillness surrounding them. The emotional tone of this hour often turned contemplative. Many guards reported that the deepest thinking occurred just before sunrise. Fatigue lowered defenses of the mind, allowing memories and questions to surface freely. A soldier might reflect on childhood far away from warfare, or wonder whether future generations would remember his service. These private reflections rarely entered written history, yet they shaped the inner lives of countless medieval individuals. Inside noble quarters, attendants began quiet preparations before their masters awoke. Clothing was laid out carefully, fireplaces stirred back to life, and wash basins filled with water drawn moments earlier from cold wells. Servants moved silently, trained to prepare comfort without disturbing sleep. Their efficiency ensured that morning appeared effortless to nobles, masking the labour already completed before sunrise. In the kitchens, activity intensified steadily. Dough prepared hours earlier expanded beautifully, ready for baking. The first loaves entered ovens, releasing rich aromas that slowly travelled through corridors. The smell of fresh bread symbolized stability and prosperity. Its absence would signal crisis. Even before sunlight touched the towers, nourishment was already being secured for the day ahead. Stable yards awakened gradually as well. Horses sensed movement and shifted impatiently, hooves striking wooden floors. Stable hands spoke softly to calm them, offering feed and brushing coats. The bond between humans and animals became especially visible at this quiet hour. Free from the urgency of daytime duties, gentle murmurs, rhythmic brushing, and warm breath created an atmosphere of peaceful cooperation. Within the chapel, early prayers reached their final verses. Candles reflected softly off polished metal reliquaries and painted icons. Worshippers emerging from prayer carried calm expressions, shaped by spiritual reflection. For many medieval people, surviving another night reinforced faith. Dawn represented divine mercy renewed daily. The spiritual rhythm of prayer framed existence, giving meaning to both hardship and hope. Occasionally, unexpected events interrupted the calm transition toward morning. A messenger arriving after travelling all night might bring urgent news requiring immediate attention. The sudden sound of hooves crossing the drawbridge could awaken parts of the castle instantly. Sleepy guards became alert, servants rushed to receive travellers, and quiet corridors filled briefly with purposeful movement. Even during peaceful times, the castle remained prepared to shift from rest to action without warning. The natural world outside slowly reclaimed visibility. Shapes of trees emerged from darkness, revealing frost-covered branches or dew-laden leaves. Birds gathered along battlements, their calls increasing in confidence as light grew stronger. Ravens and pigeons, accustomed to castle life, waited expectantly for scraps that would soon appear once kitchens fully opened. As the eastern sky brightened, colours returned gradually to stone walls. Grey surfaces warmed into shades of golden brown, transforming the fortress's appearance from mysterious night guardian into active seat of power. The transition reminded inhabitants how perception changed with light. What felt ominous at night became ordinary by day. Those ending night duties experienced a unique satisfaction. Guards descending from towers, after hours of vigilance, shared brief smiles or tired nods with replacements. Surviving an uneventful watch was itself success. Their fatigue carried quiet pride, knowing their alertness protected everyone else's rest. Children were among the last to awaken. Their laughter, once begun, rapidly dissolved, remaining traces of night's solemnity. Lessons resumed, chores restarted, and the castle filled again with movement and conversation. Markets formed near gates, craftsmen reopened workshops, and messengers prepared to depart. Life accelerated quickly, leaving little visible evidence of the deep stillness that had existed only hours before. Yet the memory of night lingered subtly in every individual. Decisions made during sleepless reflection, prayers whispered in solitude, fears confronted in darkness, all influenced behaviour long after sunrise. The castle's daytime confidence rested upon nighttime endurance. Without the quiet labour, vigilance, and contemplation of night, the visible order of day could not exist. A night inside a medieval castle therefore revealed the hidden heartbeat of medieval society. Behind grand walls and historical legends lived ordinary moments of humanity. Caregivers tending the sick, guards resisting sleep, artisans finishing delicate work, and individuals wrestling privately with hope and uncertainty. The fortress was not merely a symbol of strength, but a shared refuge shaped by collective effort. Each sunrise marked another successful passage through darkness, reinforcing the rhythm that defined medieval existence. Night brought vulnerability, but also unity, fear, but also faith, silence, but also understanding. Within stone towers rising against the sky, countless generations experienced the same cycle. Watching flames fade, listening to wind across battlements, and welcoming dawn as proof that life continued. And so, as morning fully arrived and sunlight filled every courtyard, the castle stood once again alive with purpose, ready to face another day. Yet hidden beneath its busy surface remained the quiet truth, known only to those who had lived through the night, that within the darkness beyond power and ceremony, the medieval castle became most deeply human. As another night settled over the medieval castle on a different evening, the familiar rhythm repeated itself, yet no two nights ever felt entirely the same. Each carried its own mood, shaped by weather, news from distant lands, the emotions of its inhabitants, and the invisible tension of living in an age where certainty was rare. When darkness returned, it did not simply cover the castle, it reshaped it. The towering fortress that stood proud beneath the sun softened into a world ruled by firelight, memory, and imagination. After sunset meals and evening duties concluded, corridors gradually emptied. The fading sounds of footsteps echoed longer than expected, lingering against stone arches before dissolving into quiet. Servants extinguished unnecessary torches to conserve precious fuel, leaving sections of the castle wrapped in near-complete darkness. Movement through these spaces required familiarity. Residents navigated by memory, as much as sight, hands brushing along walls worn smooth by generations. The gatehouse remained one of the most active nighttime locations. Guards stationed here represented the castle's first and last line of defence. They monitored both the interior and exterior worlds, listening for travellers seeking refuge or threats, attempting stealthy approach. Conversations among guards were often subdued but meaningful. Stories passed between them, accounts of earlier battles, warnings learned from past sieges, humorous recollections that eased long hours of vigilance. These exchanges created bonds stronger than formal rank, built through shared responsibility. Within living quarters, sleep unfolded unevenly. Some inhabitants fell into deep rest quickly, exhaustion overcoming discomfort. Others struggled against wandering thoughts amplified by silence. The medieval world offered little distraction from internal reflection. Without glowing screens or artificial noise, the mind turned inward. A merchant visiting the castle might calculate profits and risks, while a young squire replayed training mistakes determined to improve. The night became a teacher, forcing contemplation. The castle's architecture shaped every sensation experienced after dark. Narrow windows admitted only thin streams of moonlight, creating dramatic contrasts between brightness and shadow. Spiral staircases twisted upward into darkness, each step uneven to hinder attackers, but equally challenging for sleepy residents. Heavy doors closed with resonant thuds that travelled through walls, reminding everyone of the building's immense solidity. Fire remained central to nighttime life. Hearths served as gathering points long after official activities ended. Individuals drawn to warmth often lingered near flames, staring into glowing embers as if searching for meaning within shifting patterns. Firelight encouraged storytelling, and even late at night, someone might begin recounting legends, tales of heroic ancestors, miraculous survival, or mysterious events witnessed in distant regions. These stories preserved cultural identity and offered comfort against uncertainty. In workshops attached to the castle, craftsmen sometimes continued work quietly. Candle makers shaped wax carefully. Fletchers prepared arrows feather by feather, and metal workers inspected tools cooling after long use. Productivity during night hours depended on urgency, upcoming travel, military preparation, or noble ceremonies, required completion regardless of fatigue. Such dedication revealed how medieval communities depended on constant effort rather than fixed working hours beyond the walls. The surrounding land entered its own nighttime existence. Farmers' cottages glowed faintly in distant valleys, and occasional lanterns marked travellers' continuing journeys despite darkness. From high towers, guards could observe these tiny signs of life, feeling simultaneously powerful and isolated. The castle protected territory, yet its inhabitants often felt removed from ordinary rural rhythms below. Animals played subtle but essential roles throughout the night. Barn cats stalked silently, preventing rodents from destroying precious supplies. Owls perched atop towers, scanning fields for prey. Even insects buzzing near torches contributed to the sensory environment, reminding residents that life persisted everywhere, despite human attempts at control. The emotional tone of night frequently encouraged honesty. Conversations held quietly between friends or family carried deeper meaning than daytime exchanges, shaped by duty. A knight might confide doubts about an upcoming campaign. A servant might share dreams of eventual freedom or advancement. Without witnesses, hierarchy softened, allowing individuals to connect simply as human beings, sharing the same fragile existence. Medical emergencies often revealed the castle's vulnerability. Illness did not respect social rank, and sudden sickness could awaken entire sections of the fortress. Healers summoned from sleep hurried through corridors, carrying herbs, cloths, and simple instruments. Candles illuminated anxious faces gathered around bedsides. Recovery or loss during night hours left lasting emotional marks, reinforcing awareness of life's uncertainty. Storms intensified castle nights dramatically, Wind roared across battlements, rattling shutters and causing torches to flicker wildly. Thunder reverberated through stone structures like distant siege engines, while lightning illuminated towers in brief flashes, revealing every architectural detail. During such storms, inhabitants felt both protected and humbled, secure within walls, yet reminded of nature's immense power. Some nights brought unexpected beauty rather than fear. Clear skies revealed countless stars rarely visible today. Residents familiar with constellations watched seasonal changes reflected overhead. The Milky Way stretched across the sky like a luminous river, inspiring awe and spiritual reflection. Many believed the heavens displayed divine order guiding earthly events, making nighttime sky observation both scientific and sacred. Deep night also fostered creativity. Musicians practiced quietly, composing melodies inspired by solitude. Poets drafted verses describing love, faith, or longing. Artists sketched by candlelight, capturing expressions seen earlier in the day. These private acts of creation rarely entered official records, yet contributed profoundly to medieval culture and personal fulfillment. The castle's defensive mechanisms remained ever present reminders of danger. Arrow slits framed darkness beyond walls. Murder holes waited unused above gates, and weapons rested ready despite peaceful conditions. Even during calm nights, preparedness shaped behavior. Guards inspected equipment repeatedly, ensuring readiness against threats that might never come but could not be ignored. As hours passed, fatigue spread gently across the fortress. Fires dimmed, conversations ended, and even restless minds surrendered temporarily to sleep. The castle entered a state of collective rest, supported by a small number remaining awake. Guards, bakers, monks, and caretakers, sustaining continuity for everyone else. Eventually, the subtle transformation toward dawn began once more. The horizon lightened almost imperceptibly, replacing deep black with soft blue. Cold air shifted, carrying scents of morning dew and distant vegetation. Birds announced the coming day long before sunlight appeared, their calls echoing through courtyards and along walls. With the first rays of sunlight, the castle emerged renewed. Night's introspection faded beneath purposeful movement. Servants reopened shutters, merchants approached gates, and nobles prepared for governance and diplomacy. The fortress resumed its visible role as center of authority and protection. Yet beneath this daily renewal remained the hidden legacy of every night experienced within those walls. Each evening had revealed vulnerability, strengthened relationships, encouraged reflection, and tested vigilance. The castle survived not merely because of its thick stones, but because generations of people endured darkness together, maintaining hope until dawn returned. A night inside a medieval castle was therefore an unfolding human story repeated across centuries, a quiet drama of endurance, belief, labor, and companionship, played beneath flickering firelight and endless stars. Within that darkness, life slowed enough for people to confront themselves, remember their past, and prepare unknowingly for the future waiting beyond the next sunrise.